Hi, Timi. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, doing well. And we were just going to say, I'm a Kat from Loqbox.
And I'm Sam from Loqbox.
And for anyone that's new here, we're the money app giving people the tools they need to do a little bit better, from growing their credit scores to building their savings to just understanding how it all works.
And in today's live, we are joined by Mr Timi Johnson, aka Mr MoneyJar, who's come to talk to us about how the link between your financial health and your well-being can be developed and explored. So before we get started though, we won't be answering any questions today about Loqbox memberships. You will need to get in touch with our lovely support team if you have any questions, as that is obviously personal private information and we don't really want to discuss it on the live for you. But yeah, so don't forget, if you do want to do that, you can chat to our team just by going to our bio and then clicking the link in there.
So for those of you who don't already know Timi, he's an award-winning financial content creator, podcaster, author, and founder of Mr MoneyJar, a UK-based financial education company. So Timi, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you so much, Kat and Sam, for having me on. It's been a while since I've done an Instagram live. I've probably done over 100 of these over the last 2-3 years because I used to run a like my podcast on it on the format, and yeah, it was going to take a very special organization and two very special people to get me back on here, so thank you very much for having me.
Fantastic, it's lovely to have you. Yeah, and as we mentioned at the start, if you do have any questions for Timi that we can talk about at the end of the live, please do put them in the question function on the live. So before we get started on the Q&A, Timi, we'd love to know a little bit more about you. So the name that you use on your social and in other places is Mr MoneyJar. Where did that name come from?
Yeah, there's a few kind of things to it. So firstly, I got started doing this in 2019. And at the time, the name was just a money jar. So I had some concerns around like showing my face on social media. If you see my personal social media platform, I have like no followers, no posts. I don't really use it personally. But then organically, people started to call me Mr MoneyJar. And so I changed it to that. I also noticed that when I posted using my face, people started to engage a bit more. No idea why. Thank you to the people. Yes, also, when I was like 5, my uncle and aunt did buy me a money jar in the shape of a bear. No. Actually, let me get it for you.
Oh yeah,
yeah, please do. That would be great. I'd love to see it.
Fantastic.
1 second.
Great, thank you. You usually expect like piggy bank, don't you? Not necessarily a bear.
A bear. So I've never seen a bear savings jar before.
That's pretty cool.
Really cool.
Like I can't have been older than 5 or 6 years old. They got me this.
That's amazing.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
And I still use it to this day. Obviously, we don't use cash as much now, but during lockdown, we were on one of those like family Zoom things, and I showed it to my uncle, and he was like, what the, like, how do you still have that? He hasn't seen it in like 2 decades. But also, my surname is Merriman Johnson, as you said at the start. So Mr MJ is a double entendre.
Ah.
Nice. That's fate.
I hadn't worked that one out at all. Yeah. And what was it that made you start Mr MoneyJar as an education company back in 2019?
Yeah, like questions that I had around money personally, no matter what age you are, no matter what kind of stage of life you're at, whether you have a lot of money, whether you have a little, money just is a very important part of our lives. And as a young person, when I started working, I had questions around how investing worked, how pensions worked, like how to increase your income. And I didn't really see much around. And I think depending on, you know, the school you go to, the type of family you come from, you may not necessarily get to learn about money that much as well. So I wanted to try and answer some of these questions for myself. And what year are we now? It's about 5 years ago, on a massive personal development push. Like I read like 37 books in 1 year, like all on the topic of money and productivity and stuff and investing. And once I got to the point where I started to see and read the same things over and over again, I then actually I didn't start a social media page. I started a blog, which no one read apart from my wife.
Yeah.
So thank you very much to her. And yeah, and then I went to social media because that's where people generally were. So that's why I started the page. Lockdown was a lot of like social media content, lives, as I mentioned. But this year, as the world has started to open up a little bit, I've started to do more kind of workshops and speaking at things as well. And I really enjoy being in, in real life with people, and I hope to do more of that.
Yeah, fantastic. And speaking of things that have, happened since we've come out of lockdown and the world's opened up again, we saw recently that you ran the London Marathon. What inspired you to do that? Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, bar none.
Yeah.
And I've run like a few half marathons before, but that extra like half, rather than being twice as hard, it's like 4 times as hard. But lots of family and friends came out to support, lots of people come out to support, and they literally get you round. Otherwise, why would you run 26 miles for no reason? Like, every fiber in your body is telling you to just stop and just go into the nearest pub or McDonald's or whatever. So I did it for a few reasons. Firstly, it was a bucket list item. I think that when you set yourself challenges and you do hard things, you prove to yourself in your brain that you can do hard things. So now I know I've done that. The next time something hard comes up, I'll be like, yeah, but do you remember that time when you like ran the marathon? And then it will seem a lot smaller in comparison. The first half marathon I did, I could barely walk afterwards, but now it seems like a tiny thing now that I've done this harder thing. So that's the first reason. The second reason is, as I've gotten older, and I do think this relates to the topic of financial well-being, I've started to prioritize spending on my health. You get older, stuff stops working. Well, not everything, but like, like back pain and that sort of thing, just from sitting down. I've had like random food intolerances show up. So I got like a PT. I went like fully into it to like look after myself. And then the last reason is I wanted to have a go at fundraising. So if I'm able to share, like, really happy to have raised over £3,000 for Crisis, the national charity for people facing homelessness. And I want to raise thousands of pounds over the course of my career. I really, really enjoyed that. And thank you to everyone who donated.
That's amazing and such a fantastic achievement, both personally and, like you say, for the charity. Yeah, well done.
Yeah, congratulations. I'd love to think that I was going to be running a marathon soon, but that is a lot of commitment. But it's definitely inspiring. So thank you, Timi. And today is World Mental Health Day. So this year's theme, which we were really inspired by, is making mental health and well-being for all a global priority. So one of the things that we wanted to talk to you about today was money and well-being. So for you personally, what does financial well-being mean to you?
Yeah, for me, financial well-being it's not about how much money you have, it's about how you feel about your money. Like when you think about finances, is it like a positive emotion that you have or a negative emotion? Because there's that famous saying or like question, does money buy happiness? And I guess to a certain extent it does, but it's not like what's the word now? It's not like you can take everyone in the world, put the richest people on one end and the poorest people on the other, and have like a scale in how happy those people are. So financial well-being is actually really important in terms of feeling good about where you're at. I also think it's about the positive feedback loop between using money to bring joy to your life, and then that joy then helps you to make more money. And I also think it's about making the world a better place as well. Because as we've seen with things like the climate crisis and like disease and war and stuff, you can use money to solve these problems and make the world a better place, or you can use money to just make money in the kind of random way. And that latter way is not going to help us. Yeah,
absolutely. There's such a complicated link. And also it's complicated, but it's also remarkably simple, the link between how money can make you feel good and bad at the same time. It's a very interesting thing to explore.
Yeah.
One thing that we come across quite a lot is people sometimes feel that they can't face a certain financial situation because they find it too difficult to actually look at it. What advice would you give to someone who is finding it difficult to address a difficult financial situation?
Yeah, the simplest thing you can do is to talk to someone. So that can be a friend, a family member, or a financial advisor, educator, or like charity that's set up to help people. Talk to someone that you trust. Start small. You don't need to like say all of the details or whatever, but I kind of relate it to like if you had a problem with your health, you turn to someone that you may not necessarily go to a doctor straight away, but you'll turn to like a partner, a friend, your parent or a sibling or something, and just share with them. And by sharing with them, you know, a problem shared is a problem halved in the first instance. But then when it comes to talking to people who like educate and advise and like financial charities, I think by doing that, you're educating yourself as to your rights. I'll give you an example. Like in a previous job that I was in, I was struggling with how much I was being paid on that job, and I had like no idea how to like ask for more money. And I also felt like I couldn't talk to anyone about how much I earned as a way of benchmarking or as a way of getting more information. Now, I did eventually speak to people, but I didn't do the educating myself, the informing myself piece, because knowing now what I now know. So for people who don't know, we have the 2010 Equality Act. It renders pay secrecy clauses in contracts unenforceable. So it's actually completely legal for you to speak to your colleagues about how much you earn. Therefore removing that feeling of worthlessness and like, oh, I'm not being paid enough, which therefore empowers you to speak to your employer and ask for more money. So you need to share, but you also need to know what your rights and your entitlements are so that you can actually do something about the problem.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and actually kind of quite nicely following on from that, one of the things we wanted to ask you about is how people can become more comfortable talking about their finances with family and friends, or just in general, as you say, with colleagues as well.
How people can become more comfortable. I think it, yeah, so it's about educating yourself. It's about knowing like how finances work so that you can articulate like things to certain people. But I also think, because we're talking about like mental health, there are certain things that money makes us feel that can get us down. So it could be about how much debt you're in. It could be about how much you're being paid. You can, like, we're very prone to equating our personal value to things that are external to us. And something that I learned about, I did like quite a bit of therapy last year, is a concept called unconditional self-acceptance, which I think is a very, very important thing to cultivate. And just simply put, it says that rather than seeking happiness or validation from things that are external to you, actually, you accept yourself up front, regardless of how much money you earn, how much debt you're in, whether like people fancy you or not, like the size of your house and stuff. Actually, the first step is to just accept yourself for who you are. And that's not saying that you won't seek things out or that you won't want to better yourself, but you need to be able to love yourself regardless of whatever situation you're in. The reason why this is practiced by basically nobody is because it doesn't really suit a super competitive capitalist society that wants to sell you stuff. And I don't mean to like get conspiratorial, but it's like it's the system we're in wants us to feel like we're not enough unless we buy this, go on this holiday, get this many likes, earn this much like money and stuff. It's like all false. Like your value as a human being comes from the fact that you're a living, breathing human being. That's it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
so true. And it's such an important thing, I think, for people to remember that their worth is not dictated by any number. It's about them being a person. Fantastic. Thanks, Timi. So we reached out to our members and our followers to ask for their questions on financial well-being. And if you're happy to, we can kick off with some of those questions, if that works.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So if you are watching and you do have a question for Timi, do add it using the question button at the bottom of the live, and we'll get to those after we've gone through our member questions.
All right then. So I have one question here, Timi, from Danielle. So she says that her mental health affected her spending in the past. I think that's something quite a lot of people would be able to relate to.
Yeah.
But she was wondering if that's the sort of thing she could add to her credit file. She says she's been in therapy and she's managing her money much better now, and she'd just like to tell people about it.
Yeah, well, firstly, like, congratulations to Danielle for like having a problem, like seeking help, and then actually being able to manage her money better. Definitely been there before, in all three of those stages. Now, the thing with like the credit rating system is that it is sort of, it's a I'm trying to find a better word than unsophisticated, but basically like the information that's held about you is purely like financial, based on your financial behavior. And so you can apply to have things removed from your credit report if it's incorrect, if you've been a victim of fraud, for example. But my understanding is that it's not as sophisticated as, you know, I had a mental health problem and therefore can my credit report be amended because of this. What you can request on your credit report, though, is something called a notice of correction. And this is a statement that you can ask to have added to your credit report. It can be no longer than 200 words. And it's as a means of mitigation if there's things on there that you think require additional context, or like explaining why there's a missed payment, explaining why there's arrears on your report. Now, that won't be like a catch-all solution when lenders come to look at your credit report, but it is read by them and it could help provide additional context. The only thing to be mindful of with a notice of correction is two things. Firstly, there are three main credit reference agencies in the UK, so you'll need to do it with each of them. They are Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. Equifax and TransUnion require you to write a letter to them to do this notice of correction. Experian, I'll say to be safe, write to them, but you might be able to do it online. So that's the first thing. And the second thing with the notice of correction is, I've lost my train of thought.
Circle back if you
said the first thing is that you can provide that notice for correction, but it needs to be to all three of the CRAs and in writing for at least the first two that you mentioned.
No, so thank you. That's reminded me. The second thing with the notice of correction is, if it's like a one-off thing and you provide that additional context, that's going to be a lot more convincing to lenders and to people that are checking your credit report than an ongoing pattern of behavior on your credit file. So that's something to just be mindful of. Thank you.
Definitely. Yeah. And it's really useful to hear about that, because I don't think it's something that a lot of people know is an option for these exceptional circumstances. Yeah. So yeah, really, really great. Thank you. So we have another question here from Ian, who says that his debt relief order is due to come off his credit file in December as the 6 years are up. He wants to know how that's likely to affect his credit score.
Yeah, okay, so congrats to Ian for coming to the end of the 6 years. A few months ago, I did a post on my page which showed Experian, like how Experian scores you based upon on both the positive and the negative side. And what it showed was that for things like county court judgments, IVAs and DROs, you get that hard mark on your credit file for 6 years, but that it reduces every 2 years, and then it's finally lifted after the last chunk of 2 years of the 6 years, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So what I would expect to see is, once that 6 years is up, for there to be an uplift in Ian's credit score in the first instance. Now, DROs do stay on your credit file, but it'll be very important for him to make sure that it's marked as discharged.
Right.
It's also important for him to know that there will be some lenders who will be okay with the fact that he's had a DRO, but then there'll be other lenders who may choose not to lend to him because he's had a DRO. But there will be lenders out there who will be willing to lend to him. You know, there might be specialist lenders out there. And a really good resource for how this works, because it's quite a complex and like nuanced area, is check out Step Change's online guide on DROs. They're a fantastic debt advice charity. And oh, Debt Camel. Sarah's in the comments. Sarah, yeah, Sarah is like the go-to person about this. Sarah says if he's been using Loqbox and the DRO going, should leave him with a great credit record.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. Fantastic.
Music Suarez.
Yeah, but the step change guide on this is very, very good.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, they've got some really great information about DROs in general as well, don't they? And if people are making decisions, comparing those to other options like IVOs too.
Yeah.
So we have another one here, which I think a lot of people will identify with at the moment, which is from Paula. And she says, why can't fresh food like fruit and vegetables be cheaper for well-being? And obviously, I think quite a lot of us are thinking this way at the moment with the cost of living going up and up. But what kind of shopping tips might you have for Paula and just for people in general who are living on a limited budget at the moment?
Yeah. The cost of food like bills, fuel, massively going up. It makes it very difficult to change your behavior because it's not like it's luxuries, it's stuff that you need to buy that's becoming more and more expensive. When it comes to fruit and vegetables specifically, I saw something really interesting in the past week. I bought some oranges, and normally I'm living in like a smaller like place now. Normally I'll keep them in this is a probably too long a story, but I promise there is like
no, I love it. Carry on.
Yeah, so normally when I buy fruit, I keep it in a fruit bowl outside like of the fridge, but because I'm living in kind of smaller circumstances now, all of our fruit is stored in the fridge. I found that storing fruit in the fridge keeps it fresher for way longer. 1, 2, I noticed that these oranges had been in there for like 2 weeks. And when I checked the expiry date, there wasn't one. It says not dated to reduce food waste. So I think there's something around like the way that we store our fruit and our vegetables, but also just like rather than going off dates, because I used to just, once it got to the date, I used to just chuck stuff out. Actually just like giving it a squeeze, looking at it and seeing whether it'll be something you'd be willing to eat. Because I used to be really religious about use by dates on fruits and vegetables. The same is the case with salad. Like before I used to see salad and think, well, the date's gone, so I'm going to chuck it out. But now if it like looks and smells all right, I'll just eat it. I think buying frozen fruits and vegetables really helps with food waste as well. And they're just as nutritious and just as fresh, whether they're frozen or whether they're not, and easier to store potentially, like chopped carrots versus loose carrots. Other things I think are noteworthy, Aldi recently became the 4th biggest supermarket in the UK. People are voting with their wallets. They're going to places that are like cheaper to shop at. I also remember seeing a social media post saying that like the average shop is also cheapest there, or it's one of the cheapest for that. I think buying non-perishables in bulk is super important. So you're washing up liquid tabs are like super expensive now, like washing powder is super expensive now. So things that you're going to use anyway, but that can also be stored in your house, see if you can buy them in bulk. Of course, that requires you to have the amount of money to be able to do that, but just see if you can do that. Also, there are some great food sharing platforms out there, like Olio, like Too Good To Go. Olio is more suited towards peer-to-peer food sharing. Too Good To Go is more for like high street retailers listing kind of food that they would have thrown away, but they just list it for cheaper. They're worth doing that as well. I got married last year, and we got thank you. We got a wedding cake, and we couldn't finish all of it. And I put it on Olio, and like people came. It was a bit like a very similar experience to when you sell stuff on eBay, but it was with food, and people came and took it, and it was great.
Yeah, it's a lovely thing to be able to, you know, get that kind of community spirit around food as well, and to feel like you're helping other people. It's really it's more rewarding than buying something on eBay.
Thank you. And yeah, we've got another really lovely question here, which I really liked when I read it, which is from Natasha. So she says, how can we make money work for us? which I love. And like, there's so many different ways that you could read that as a question. But do you personally, Timi, have any tips on how to make money go further at the moment?
I think there's a few ways to interpret this question. I am a big fan of purchases which last a really, really long time.
Yeah.
I think the best thing I've ever bought, or one of the best things I've ever bought, was a coat from Uniqlo, like 7 years ago or something. And like, whenever I wear it, I'm never cold. It like is still in good nick. I have to dry clean it every once in a while. And I just think to myself, like, imagine if every single thing I bought was as well picked out as this thing, because there's so many things that we buy where the cost per use is like one.
Yep.
If you buy a pint, the cost per use of that is just one. That is, you're drinking your £5 and then like getting rid of it later that evening. So I think buying high cost per use items, and what that means is you spend the money is gone, but the amount of times you're going to use this thing is high. The amount of time you're going to use this thing for is really high. It's super, super important. The same is the case with shoes. I did a post once on like, you know, the importance of like buying good quality shoes, a good quality mattress, something that you're going to use a lot, versus buying many, many cheap pairs of shoes. The latter actually ends up working out as being less expensive. Again, I say that with full consideration of the fact that you need to be able to have the buying cost to get the high quality stuff. But it's a way of thinking about using your money that's a bit different. Other ways to make your money go further, of course, if you have savings like non-emergency fund savings, interest rates are going up at the moment. So the amount of interest we can expect to be paid on our savings is expected to go up. Easy access accounts, regular savers, good for that. And then for longer term, you know, investing, saving into a pension, also ways to make your money go further. Obviously, we're talking about years and decades rather than days and weeks, but this is money that's going to, provided it's money that you don't need, that's going to grow, hopefully, and outpace inflation, so that when you come to draw down on it in future, it's worth more.
Absolutely. All really great tips, for sure.
Yeah. You actually mentioned something there, Timi, which we often get questions about when we post on social media, which is an emergency fund.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering if you could explain what that is, just for people watching in case anyone doesn't understand, and like how people can think about building one of those.
Sure, yeah. So what I'll say is, when I was younger, the idea of saving for apparent, like seemingly no reason at all, seemed like a very abstract concept to me. Like you either saved up towards something or you spent your money, and it was normally the latter. And when I went to university, I got a student account that had an overdraft on it. It was like the overdraft, like rail card, student bank account. And so whenever I needed to borrow money, I would dip into my overdraft. But then I ended up staying in my overdraft. And then many years later, that was like a debt I was in that I was paying fees for. So the way that I explain an emergency fund is, it's like your own personal overdraft, only you fund it yourself. So that if you lose your job, if you have to make a large unexpected purchase, you have a pot of cash that's set aside that isn't debt. It's not a credit card. It's not an overdraft. It's money that you've saved yourself, that you can dip into, that you can access quickly to get you through a difficult time. What I'm actually really pleased to say is that I think the pandemic changed a lot of our attitudes, particularly young people's attitudes towards having emergency savings, because we saw, many of us for the first time, that our circumstances could change quite quickly. So yeah, like emergencies happen. Your situation can change. You may need to draw upon money. You can either do that with money that you have saved yourself, or you can rely on debt. And you're in a much more secure position if you can rely on yourself for that. Now, in terms of how to build one, the way that I like to approach it is just to set a goal at a specific point in future, and then to calculate the amount of months between today and that goal, and to divide the goal by the number of months. The general advice around emergency funds is that they should equal 3 to 6 months of your living costs. I think if you like read online, you'll see a lot of that. I actually think that for a lot of people, particularly in the cost of living crisis, that's going to be like a lot of money. Like, you want me to have 6 months of living costs plus save for a house deposit plus like do all the things that I want to do. So what I would say is, even having a lump sum, you know, a few £100 if you can, a grand, like whatever pertains to your situations, is going to give you a lot of peace of mind, a lot of financial peace of mind, knowing that if something happens, great, I've got this money, it's sitting in an easy access account, I can use it if I need to.
Yeah,
absolutely. Really important. And like you say, I think the last couple of years have really led people to reevaluate how they save and what they're saving for. So yeah, fantastic. So those are all the questions that we've been sent by our members and audience in advance. I'm just going to have a quick check and see if we've had any questions on our live. Don't forget, if you are watching and you do have a question for Timi, pop it in the questions box. And we haven't received any as of yet.
If either of you have any questions for me, I'd be
yeah.
I do. There is a question that I had, which is, so we did a survey recently around people's financial well-being and trying to understand a bit more about what makes people feel financially well, and we asked our members if they've ever had to take time off work because they've been so worried about money, so that it's brought them to the point where they're ill. And this is something that you mentioned obviously earlier when you were talking about how it can be similar to when you're in a bad financial situation and it's like you need to talk to a doctor if you're feeling physically ill. But when we asked this question, we found that 30% of people have had to take time off work due to financial worry, and another 40% have been close to that. So that's almost 70% of the people that we asked said that their finances had made them physically ill, which is an astonishing number.
Yeah.
Is there something, are there any ways that people can recognise this link between their financial health and their physical health that can prevent them getting to this point? How can people sort of check in with themselves and understand that when their finances are making them unwell?
Wow, yeah, that is a really really huge statistic. Like if you think about it, I have in my life like a money routine. It used to be monthly, now it's weekly. Actually, it's not even like a money routine. It's actually more of an admin routine. So like every week, I'll sit down, I'll go through my finances. I have like a to-do list that I keep. I'll look through that. I'll like plan my week ahead. I think it's really important to do these things, to just take stock and reflect on what's going on with the different buckets in your life, and to ask yourself questions about how you're feeling in these moments. The reason why I carry on saying that, like I do it weekly, is because I've actually told people about this and I immediately see their eyes glaze over and they're like, that's like way too often. There's no way I'm going to sit down and look at my finances weekly. So like whatever the frequency is, my financial routine looks like this. How much money came in? How much money did I spend? And across different categories. I use a free budgeting app to do this. You link your bank account to it, it'll split it up into different categories. So you can look and see like where your rent's going, where your bills are going. And then I think your spending is a key. So I'll be transparent with you, like no one's ever asked me a question like this before. So I'm just kind of going through, like, if I wanted to see that something was affecting me, how would I do that? And one of the places I'd look at is my spending. I know that there is a loose correlation between my Amazon spend and my happiness, an inverse correlation. And so if I'm like spending loads online, that tells me that I need to ask myself if I'm okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, and particularly if you looked at like the email timestamps of those purchases as well, you'd see lots of very like erratic late night purchases of things I don't necessarily need, online, because buying stuff feels good. Like there's an endorphin release associated with it, and it's more about the buying of the thing than whether you will use the thing or not. So look at your spending. Everyone knows what their emotional spending like looks like, and if you don't know what it looks like, just like ask yourself, you know, is there something about the way that I'm spending that is like noteworthy? So look at my money in and look at my money out. I also check my credit scores, plural, during my routine as well. That is completely free to do. So we mentioned the 3 credit reference agencies before. You can sign up to Experian directly to check your credit score with them. You can sign up to ClearScore to check your Equifax credit score, and you can sign up to Credit Karma to check your TransUnion one. That will let you know, the state of your, like financial behavior, your borrowing behavior. That can also be a touch point for you to be like, am I happy with how this is going? Do I need to improve or anything? They'll show you things like your credit utilization and that sort of thing, so you can use that as a judge. And then I'll also look at what I plan to do in the week ahead as well. I think it's important to spend time with people, but I don't think you need to like spend a lot of money doing that. So I'll make sure that the time I'm spending with people, the things I'm doing, are things I'm actually happy to do, and that I'm not doing it out of peer pressure or guilt or anything like that. So yeah, those are just some of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, that's all really helpful. I think particularly when you said about the correlation between spending and how you're feeling. I think for a lot of people, the sort of instant rush of buying something new is a really can be a coping mechanism for some people. It can just be something that people enjoy doing. But if someone does find that spending is the thing that makes them feel better, albeit possibly temporarily, how would you go about breaking that cycle? What would you advise to help people get out of that sort of spending habit?
3 things I've tried. I'd be interested to see what you both think about this. One is just delete the apps from your phone.
Yeah.
Like, why do they have apps? Why is it so easy? Why do the apps send you notifications? Why is it so easy for you to buy stuff? Like, you can buy stuff by swiping now.
Yeah.
So it's about finding out the environments you're in that don't necessarily bring out the best in you, and then just severing the link.
Yeah.
Related to that is like marketing emails. Why do they send you marketing emails to your inbox? Why are emails so valuable in e-commerce and stuff? It's because you get a direct link to prospective customers. So again, unsubscribe from them. I had a really quite harmful spending loop when I was at university, where I would get marketing emails from a video game site, and it was just like all the stuff was like really cheap, and I would just spend like £10 here, £20 there on stuff that I just wasn't using. I just thought I was getting a deal because it was cheap. And then you look back and it's like, wow, I spent like hundreds of quid on stuff that I don't even use.
Yeah.
So that's the second thing. And then also, I would recommend, this is like the slightly untested one, but it's worked for me. And I call it the online window shop. Go on the website, put the stuff in your basket, feel like you're buying it, and then take the stuff out of the basket.
Yeah.
Like that's worked for me sometimes. And I'm pretty sure there was like a 90s version of that, which is like the joy you get from browsing the Argos catalog. Like, you don't need to buy it, but you just, so you just look at it and you're like, yeah, it'd be really cool if I had this thing.
Yeah.
And then you just don't go through the purchase.
It was definitely a very formative thing in my youth, like going through the Argos catalogue at Christmas and circling all the things all the time.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I didn't even want to go into that much detail because I didn't want to embarrass myself. But there's a reason why Bill Bailey calls it the laminated book of dreams.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah.
But it did, it was a fun thing to do, and it does give that similar kind of kick. Another thing, I guess, Pinterest, like saving things like, can be a really nice activity rather than actually checking out what's in your basket.
Yeah.
I think that delay allows you to break that cycle of spending a little bit, and you really get that time to think about, as you were saying earlier, about whether this item is actually going to do what I want, whether it's going to last, whether it's going to have that kind of low cost per use over time that you were talking about earlier. Yeah.
So do you have any questions for Timi, Kat?
Yeah, so one thing I was going to say, obviously earlier on we congratulated you for all of your training and successfully running the marathon in London the other week. But one thing I was thinking about is when I think about finances and my own personal journey with money and kind of learning how to use it, finding out that information I didn't get taught at school, I often think about it as kind of like training myself to be better with money. Do you think there's anything that you learned through training from the marathon that you think might be able to help people with that kind of applying themselves to their money and actually not avoiding any problems that they're having with it at the moment, but sitting down and started?
I do think so. Is there a link between prepping for a marathon and like prepping your finances, basically?
Yeah.
I do think that there are similarities, because you don't just run a marathon, you don't sign up for a marathon and run it the next day. Even the beginner's training guide is 6 months long. So there are some similarities. If you want to save up a large amount of money, no one's expecting you to have it the next day. You set a date 6, 12 months in the future, as we were talking about before. You take the overall amount of money you want to save and you divide it by the number of months. And you set those kind of targets. Similarly, with running, you build slowly over time and you get to your goal not through a windfall or something sudden happening, but by just small runs over time and then gradually increasing them until you get to the point where you can run for a substantial distance. So I do think that they're similar to each other. I also think that it also highlights the importance of having goals and making them tangible as well. Like I'm sure you've heard of like SMART goals, for example. So I think you do need to be specific about what you want to achieve. With a marathon, it's kind of made simpler because marathons are of a particular length. But if you do have financial goals, rather than be like, I want to save more or I want to start investing, try and say like, I want to save £1,000 by this date, or I want to start investing £25 a month, which actually quite a few investment platforms will let you do. Making your goals more specific will actually give you something to anchor what you're doing, going towards. Similarly with running, there's actually a great book by a woman called Angela Duckworth called Grit. It's actually my wife's favorite book. And in it, there's like a bit in the book where she's talking about how she runs, but she never seems to get faster. And she was talking to someone about this, and the person said, but do you track your runs? Or do you just go out and run? Nothing wrong with going out and running, but if you don't actually go, by this date, I want to be able to run, a 5K in this time, and by this date, I want to be able to run a 10K in this time, then you're not going to improve or get worse. You're just going to kind of do it. So just be very clear about whether you're doing something for the fun of it and mindfully, or whether there are actual milestones that you want to achieve over the course of your training for your finances or for a run or any area that you're trying to improve on in your life, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We have got another question just in here from the late Lord Byron. And they say, let me just read this. I'm about to start my own business. It's going to be a big thing for me. How do I balance any pessimism versus natural worrying about the future? Congratulations on starting your own business, first of all. But yeah, Timi, do you have any thoughts for that about kind of the concerns about the future versus?
Yes, it's balancing, pessimism, realism, and
realism,
the optimism for the success of the business.
Congratulations to late Lord Byron. I think that, so this is actually a very apt question because Mr MoneyJar is going to turn 3 tomorrow, and that will make it my longest ever job.
Brilliant.
And similar to what we were just talking about, running a business, like starting a business is easy. Like you have an idea, you register it on Companies House, or you register, or you know, register self-employed. But like running it is very much a marathon. If it's an idea that you really believe in and that you think needs to exist in the world, then you potentially have the rest of your life to bring this idea to fruition. So don't put pressure on yourself to know everything overnight or to be a super successful business owner at the very beginning, if we can even define what success means. I think success is just in the running of it. I don't even think it's like in achieving stuff. And I hope I'm answering the question correctly when I say in terms of pessimism, when you look on the news these days, it can be very doom and gloom. It can seem like the sky is falling in and that the world is like completely going to crap. And there are things which are problematic in this day and age. Absolutely. You know, we're worried about how people are going to heat their homes over winter. There's a war on the continent. Prices are going up, as we've been speaking about. But when in doubt, zoom out. If you actually compare the way that the world is today to 50, 100, 250 years ago, this is actually the best time to have ever been alive, particularly if you live in a country like the UK or in any kind of relatively wealthy nation. There's actually a great book on this called Factfulness by Hans Rosling. If you don't want to read the book, check out the TED Talk, or like there is a video of like Hans Rosling like talking about this. If you look at like most of the important metrics like child mortality, deaths from disease, death from war, education of women and girls, the world is actually trending upwards in all of these metrics. But these don't make headlines because it's not as sexy to say nobody died from war today. Do you know what I mean? Like they have to get clicks, and so there's shock value and that sort of thing. So I'm not trying to trivialize any of the issues that are happening in the world today, but kind of like the stock market, you know, it's about how things improve over time. If you look at, you know, the global stock market, it's not a smooth line upwards. It's like trending upwards. There'll be down periods and there'll be up periods, but the up periods do there are more up periods and down periods over long stretches of time. And yeah, just go for the business thing. I think if you have a business idea, you should just do it. Yeah.
Because and even, you know, if the business doesn't perform as you expect necessarily, or you find yourself changing direction, it's okay for that to happen. You don't have to, you know, I think people need to get comfortable with the idea of things not panning out the way they see it, and even the idea of failure. Not, you know, obviously we don't want that to be the case, but failing is another form of learning, and no one gets it 100% right 100% of the time.
Yeah, and if you listen to you know, podcasts like Diary of a CEO or How I Built This or whatever, like it's really funny. They'll like fast forward. It'll be like, so you are the CEO founder of this tremendously successful business. You're 47. So tell us about what happened starting age 42. And it's like, yeah, but there was a whole like period of this person's life where they were like trying things out and like stuff wasn't working and they had to move house and there was like strain on their family and stuff. And it's all valid. I think the running of the business is about the person you become as a result of running it. And I do think the success is in the running. The fact that you like gave it a go.
Yeah.
Like we should applaud people for that.
Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely. I do have another question. You obviously are in kind of quite a unique position, being a content creator on the internet, talking about money. But what do you think things like social media have done to the way that we view money as like a society in general? Do you think it's had an overall, like positive impact, negative impact? Are there changes that we've seen in the way that we view money since we've all started living on our phones so much?
Well, look, what we're doing now would not
Yeah.
have been possible 10 years ago, right? We're having a financial well-being talk over the internet. I've got my phone plugged in, you know. This is real life, like magic.
Yeah.
You know? But equally, you have peer pressure, you have people comparing themselves to their friends, like holidays they've been on. Because it's not just social media, it's like technological advancement has just done that over the course of our lives. I remember when I was younger, to go on the bus, it was like 40p for a child and 70p for an adult, and you'd like drop your change onto the bus driver's like little tray, like you're in a sort of Western or something. And then now, you know, I can pay for the bus like with my watch, and goodness knows what it's going to be like in another 30 years time. So technology, social media certainly has changed the way that we view a lot of these things. I think the ease of availability to credit as well is like a really big thing that's in the backdrop that kind of affects people of this generation. But, and I hope this isn't like a controversial statement, I actually think that social media is neutral. I really do. I think all of the things that people were doing prior to social media has just amplified it. So if people were showing off before the advent of social media just lets you show off to thousands of people. If people were seeking connection before social media, then social media just allows you to do that times 100 or whatever it is. So be aware of the fact that it is an amplification, but it's us that are doing the things at the end of the day. And you've got to use technology to suit you, and you've got to know your limitations as well. I use social media for work, but I don't have any social media on my personal phone. If I want to access a social media platform, I need to do it via my web browser. Because again, it's like the shopping thing. They have apps, they have notifications, they have all these things because they know that you're way more likely to use it if you have the app on your phone. So just know yourself and apply boundaries over what you will and won't do with technology.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've got a few more minutes. If anyone does have any more questions for Timi, do drop them in the comments or in the question box. But before we wrap up the live, I'd be interested to understand, Timi, we have a lot of our customers, a lot of our members feel certain degrees of shame around things like debt and money problems, and that can be, we understood from the survey, that's one of the leading reasons that they don't talk to people about their financial situations. How can we, all the people watching us, how can we help people to break down that feeling of shame? What can we do as individuals to help people feel more comfortable discussing their financial situations?
I do think it's about trusted voices sharing their debt experiences, to let you know that you're not alone. But I think being in debt can be a really isolating experience. But one of the things I am happy that social media has allowed is people can kind of go, I am in lots of debt. If you look at the debt-free community hashtag, there's just so many people on there sharing their debt stories. Some of them anonymously, some of them have like revealed who they are, and it's a real like tight-knit community behind the hashtag, and I think that that's really positive. So yeah, trusted voices, authentic voices sharing their experiences will help people to see that they are not alone in their debt journey, in their debt story. One. Two, talking to someone that you trust and someone that can help you will also kind of give you a way out of it. So I've spoken to people about like debts that they're in, and I've helped people to get out of debt, and it's been something as simple as All right, sorry, I just saw a couple of comments come in. Yeah, and for these individuals, they weren't willing to list. I did like snowball and avalanche with them basically, and they weren't willing to sit down by themselves and look at the numbers and list out all of their debts. But being able to speak to me, Zoom call, spreadsheet, just like, okay, here are all the debts, here are all of the APRs, here are all of the, you know, here's when they're all due by and stuff. Having someone else to do that with, I think, can be really powerful. And if it's not with someone like me, again, great debt advice charities out there, Step Change, National Deadline Citizens Advice, they can help you with that sort of thing. And then again, so you know, sorry to bring this back up again, but like the unconditional self-acceptance piece is so like important. You aren't the amount of debt that you're in. You know, like whether you're in debt or not doesn't change your value as a human being, even though it might not feel that way. And again, like having loads of money doesn't make you more or less valuable than a human being. The reason why it can feel that way sometimes is because we are existing within capitalism, which is a system which massively prioritizes money and the amount of money people have or don't have. But the actual truth is you're a valuable human being, period, capable of getting out of debt.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So we just have time, I think, for one more question very quickly, which has come through in the comments from Whole Blazin. What are the strategies of overcoming debts? Now, obviously, that's quite a big question, but what would be the key things you think to get started in overcoming or starting to pay off your debts?
Yeah, so this is assuming that credit scores allow. Debt consolidation can be a very useful tool. So the overdraft that I was in, which then kind of became a fee paying overdraft, which then became a source of debt for me, I eventually paid that off by consolidating it. You know, money transfer, credit cards, balance transfer, credit cards can let you move debt from a high interest environment to a 0% interest environment. And as long as you make the minimum payments, you can pay them off. There's a snowball avalanche method too, which is taking all the debts that you owe and listing them. Not snowball is listing them from smallest balance first to highest balance, and then literally just paying off as much as you can from the smallest balance, and then moving on to next highest one. Avalanche, lowest interest rate first, so paying off the most expensive debt first, and then moving down the chain to the more and more expensive debt, less and less expensive debt. Sorry, but also something that might suit some people's situations is in an environment of low interest on, say, well, look, average interest rates is like, you know, it's been less than 1% for a long time, but the average interest rates on credit cards and overdrafts have been 20-30% plus. So actually, if you have loads and loads of money sitting in savings, then it could be a good idea to use some of that money to pay off your debt. Perhaps less your emergency fund.
Yeah.
Because the amount of money that those savings are earning in interest is going to be way, way less than the amount of interest you're accruing on your debt. So it's a very simple like balancing up of like interest rates on either side.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we've only got a couple of minutes left, so thanks to everyone who joined today and who submitted a question. But we did just have one final question just to end on, Timi, which is if you could only give people one tip for improving their financial being, what would it be and why?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of things that make everything else easier. And for that, I've got to give it to the emergency fund.
Yeah.
I think that if you're able to save up an emergency fund, put it in an easy access account and just have it there, the next time you encounter a financially stressful situation, the knowledge that you have that money there is going to make you feel way, way better than if that wasn't there.
Mm. Yeah.
So it's not like it's not a catch-all solution, but I do feel like it's the 20% that gives you the 80%.
Yeah.
Saving up an emergency fund.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's great advice. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant. So thank you so much for joining us today, Timi. All of that information has been brilliant, and I think, you know, it's going a long way to starting that conversation around financial well-being for our followers as well. So yeah, that's really, really important. If you want to watch this Q&A back, we will be sharing a recording to YouTube. So once we've updated that, go and have another look if you want to recap any of the advice. And in the meantime, Timi, if our followers want to find out more about what you do and the brilliant advice you give, where can they find you?
Yeah, just come follow me here on Instagram at Mr MoneyJar. It's my only account. Mr MoneyJar is in a jar of money. Where's my little
A bear jar of money.
Bear.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Hope you have a really good evening, Timi, and thanks for joining us today. It's been really great.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.